Hi there, my name is Ron Gula. I started my career in cybersecurity as a penetration tester, and I use scripts, common knowledge, and advice from my friends. And 20 years later, a lot of us are doing the same thing. Scythe allows you and your red team to change all of that and emulate not only more efficiency in your network, but emulate the best nation states and modern advanced persistent threats out there. This doesn't overwhelm your defense. It gives a scientific and realistic thing for them to train against and make sure they're not only configured right to detect these threats, but to respond and have the proper procedures. You can use automated continuous red teaming to make your red team the best one out there.
To find out more about Scythe, visit scythe.io/securityweekly. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @ThinkstCanary on Twitter. Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is the security news. First, I have a quick announcement. April 1st through the 3rd. Listeners should know what happens April 1st through the 3rd. I mean, other than April Fool's Day, it is InfoSec World at Disney's Contemporary Resort. That's right. You can connect and network with like-minded individuals in search of actionable information. InfoSecWorld.misty.com. Use the registration code OS19-SecWeek. Get 15% off the main conference or world pass. You can also go to securityweekly.com/conference request. Submit your request for a free briefing or paid interview, just as you would with RSA that I talked about earlier. How about that? Is there any more announcements? No? All righty. Let's get into the security news. Is everyone here use the password manager? Raise your hand if you use the password manager.
I do.
Yes. I use LastPass. Is everyone on last? Larry, you're last.
I use OnePass.
One password? Yeah. There was a vulnerability in, I think most of, OnePassword and LastPass both had at least one vulnerability. OnePassword might have had multiple. No knock on one. Again, it's interesting. The advice from the articles was like, yes, there's vulnerabilities in them, but you should still use them. Yes. Because the risks do not outweigh the benefits in this case. Yep. Like, there is great benefit. I couldn't survive without a password manager.
I have a great follow-on story to this, but let's finish this one.
Well, master passwords being stored in memory that could potentially be stolen by other programs in memory was the problem. In this case with LastPass, my whole thing is when I first heard of this concept of password managers, I think kind of interesting how it mirrors our previous discussion about the future, I was like, no way I'm putting all my passwords in one place. And then it was only someone I trusted, Jack Daniel, that said, no, they do a good job of keeping it encrypted. And the benefits, outweigh the risks. And I started using LastPass, and I was like, well, first I'm going to use a password that is only for my password manager. Second, I'm going to use some form of two-factor authentication. Yep. I chose the YubiKey, which turns out to be the world's biggest pain in the ass, but I deal with it because I want that level of protection. I don't want someone to be able to grab my phone and then somehow gain access to my password vault. I also keep the highly sensitive passwords outside of the vault in case it does fall into the wrong hands. I feel that things like your domains, your email, my G Suite account, others I keep outside of the password manager, give them a completely separate password, and set up two-factor authentication separately on those with a physical token is how I approach the problem. So I don't, it's bad that the password managers have vulnerabilities. Good that people are looking for them and reporting them, and they're getting fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's going to be vulnerabilities in just about everything.
Oh, yeah, it's software,
and
right?
the fact that they're getting fixed, and we'd still encourage you to use them, but use them, judiciously and appropriately.
It was the whole thing, like, my guest wireless network can be a VLAN rather than a physical interface. And I'm like, well, I really need a physical interface right now freed up. So I'm going to use VLANs. And the thought as a security professional likely crosses your mind that my security is now based onto software and not the physical layer. And you have to do the risk calculation and say, how much risk is there for the Security Weekly guest wireless network being trusted to a VLAN? I'm like, I'm going to take that risk essentially.
And does the wireless port, or does the wireless bridge pass through 802.1q trunking, so that if you're on the wireless, can you pass through 802.1?
That's a good question. I implemented it, and we'll have some technical segments on some of the things I built, but we were having this conversation earlier, Larry, that if you've got the ubiquity access points, they support 1Q.
On the Ethernet side.
And I remember, now that you say that, there's been vulnerabilities in the past where it leaks out on the wireless side.
Yes. And more importantly, can you tag your traffic on the wireless side?
Yeah. I remember we did all this.
Because that was one of the classic ones we used to do for gaining access to VoIP. Was
to jump VLANs to VoIP. I've done this before. Yeah, I've executed this attack before.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly. VLAN, do VLAN hopping, but can we do that over wireless? So...
Anyway, back to password. It's similar kind of thing, right? We're trusting it to software.
Yep. So
could we,
go ahead, Matt.
One of the things that we've been looking at in some of the different startups that we're looking at is there an ability to move away from username password, right? And look, as long as we have password, some level of password vault's required, but there's some new technologies that are coming out that I think could change the way we think about username, password, and aspects of authentication. I think it's a very interesting space to continue to track. If we could use, there's a new company out, XIID, that is proclaiming the ability to do this one-time, time-based authentication token, similar to what we do for two-factor authentication, but it wouldn't require a username and password. I mean, like, that's pretty interesting, right? If we could get there, then we maybe don't need these password vaults that have vulnerabilities. Anyways, the identity space, I think, is ripe for disruption, and I'd love to see, how we maybe eliminate aspects of this and maybe streamline what we do on this front.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of scary that some of this is happening already, but not a full implementation. In other words, if I authenticate to Google, let's say, through my browser, and I give it my unique password really long and a second factor of authentication, it's like, well, you don't really want to go through all that like every single day. And I'm like, no, I really don't, because I can never remember where my tokens are and I have to go find them. And then so you authenticate, and it's like, I'll remember you. And I think they're doing some of that in the back end, Matt, right? They're saying if you're coming from the same IP address in the same location from a machine that has the same signature, then I will trust that your credentials and second factor you provided 29 days ago are still good. And then as the user, you can very easily fall victim to that and forget about either your second factor or your password, because it doesn't ask you very often. In fact, when it asks me sometimes to re-authenticate to Google, it'll just ask me for my password. Largely because what Matt's saying is that I'm from the same IP address on the same machine, and all those other factors match up. And it's like, I don't really need to challenge you with your second factor. Had I been logged in from a different machine in China, it would have prompted me, hopefully, for my second factor authentication.
For we talk about services like that gets annoying. For me, is like Google or any of the G Suite stuff. Tells me, oh my God, everything's been blocked because you didn't log in from where you normally log in from.
The other extreme.
Because I travel a lot, and then it gets even worse when you're traveling and it's coming up as IPv6 addressing. Because Google doesn't know where the IPv6 addressing is happening from. It always shows up in the center of the country.
Interesting.
Yeah, which is crazy. So to the point that I actually turned that shit off, and it still blocks me. Like, I still have to VPN home on my phone to get my email from Gmail.
IPv6 is interesting. I was dealing with that. Largely, it just causes issues for me, and I end up disabling it on critical servers and blocking it on firewalls, because I don't have an IPv6 address from my provider. If I do, I haven't assigned one yet. I think I want to. I think I'd rather pass it and monitor it than just block it entirely and not get any of the benefits of being able to route it and pass it, right?
Right.
If we add 1 billion IoT devices to the Security Weekly network, we'll need an IPv6.
Right, exactly.
Yes. Please, let's do.
There's a lot of Raspberry, but that could be maybe not 1 billion.
Yeah. So Paul,
that might not fit in the budget. I'm just
probably
saying.
not.
Probably
That's a lot of devices.
Maybe one. So Paul, my follow-on story to that one is one that I added to the show notes not that long ago while we were doing the interview and stuff. But we talk about using password managers and all of those types of things, which is fantastic, great. But one of the things that in Guardians we found that it was a problem when we're doing pen tests is that you compromise the machine and you fire off the keystroke logger and you don't get any passwords anymore. Why? Because everybody's using password manager and they go into the password manager and they get their password from whatever service they're trying to log into. Maybe they're trying to go into a higher secured network through a jump box or something of the like. And they go into the password manager and it's all copy paste.
Yep.
So one of our guys, Adam, wrote a tool to grab copy paste to pull the clipboard constantly, to be able to pull that information from the clipboard and send it back.
Is the action when it autofills in your browser a copy-paste action?
I don't know.
A lot of times that doesn't work, and you do have to manually copy and paste.
And even we're talking about potentially other services like RDP.
Yeah, you're
or
jumping
SSH
to another. Yeah, you're
or
storing.
any of those types of
it's
things.
not a browser thing. I have passwords in there that are not browser related, right? You're like, well, if I'm going to store it somewhere, I'm going to store it on my password manager because it goes with me everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So not only that, great. So now in conjunction with, grabbing copy paste from the password manager, we can grab that. And then if you have to go to two-factor and keyboard, and we're doing keystroke logging at the same time, there's the possibility for grabbing your two-factor token for whatever the token period is.
Correct.
And your password.
Correct.
Some of that type of stuff.
Yeah, because the token, the physical token is just a keyboard.
Baby.
Yep.
60
or 30 seconds, depending. But sometimes if that's scripted, that's all you need.
If it's scripted, yeah, you could definitely pull that off.
That's all you need. The other
that
one,
token's only supposed to work once. Once it's used, it's supposed to be dead.
It's supposed to.
Supposed to.
But you mean flawed implementation of the thing?
The two-factor thing, absolutely. But in many of the cases, we're seeing still folks not with two-factor on all of their stuff. So two-factor is great. But
yeah, two-factor is great for where you've enabled it.
Right. But using a password manager is great until we end up with a tool that can grab all of your clipboard stuff and exfiltrate that. Another one that Adam used this for was the ability for to use the clipboard to do command and control exfil. Like you just keep you put something in the clipboard and then you monitor the clipboard and you pull it down. So you can do data exfil via the clipboard on compromised machines.
That's pretty cool.
So Adam just did a webcast on that today, and we released the code. I should say Adam released the code for that today.
Sweet.
So there's a link in the show notes for it. And would probably be awesome if he did a tech segment on it because it's pretty damn nifty stuff, like next level shit.
This is the other Adam. I think it was the other
Yes.
Adam because it's very similar to.
So there's an Adam Crompton.
Yes.
And there's an Adam Compton.
Adam Compton's who we worked with at Tenable.
Yes. Adam Crompton works for InGuardians.
See, whenever you say Adam that you work with, I always think it's
Adam Compton.
Yeah, Adam Compton.
Yeah, they get that a lot. There's a very near namespace collision.
Right.
On that one.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you see this new free tool that scans Chrome extensions from Duo?
No.
It's called Excavator. Scans a set of factors including permissions, external calls, third-party libraries, content security, and metadata to give, security and IT staff or those that are just interested into the safety of the browser extension. I ran it on a couple of extensions. It told me they were doing some really bad things.
Really?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Like which ones?
Like it's basically like Virus Total, but for your Chrome extensions.
Huh.
Yep.
Interesting.
It's awesome. It's awesome. They tell you everything about the extension, what it accesses, the different criticality. I mean, they ranked the criticality levels. I haven't researched them. I just looked at it quick, but I thought it was really cool. You have to either hook into the API or like manually copy and paste the name or the individual ID of that extension into the search engine. So it's very much geared towards a corporate environment that would collect that data and through an API would, at least my initial assessment of it was just that.
Interesting. Yeah, that said, I have so few extensions to my Chrome browser that I can count them on, not including the built-in Chrome ones.
Yeah, I go in and purge every once in a while, probably a lot more often than most users, but I regularly purge because they follow me, right? Because I've got the insecure Chrome thing set up that's protected by a password that you. I was talking about that last week, I think. And it follows me. So because it crosses multiple computers, and it doesn't cross into my phone though that I know of because the mobile browser is different.
Right.
But yeah, all of my computers, it carries all my extensions with it, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to carry over any insecure, well, at least to my knowledge, until Duo came out with CR Excavator, which is making me look at it. It's like a whole new, it's a whole new vulnerability scanner essentially.
Right.
Matt, it reminded me of Tenable of like, oh, there's this new thing, let's create a vulnerability scanner for it.
Yeah, just another place to look for vulnerabilities in code, and those extensions are definitely ripe for that. I mean, we load these things without thinking about it sometimes.
Right.
I don't load that many personally, which is good. It's like HubSpot and a couple other ones, but that's it.
I have a core set that's probably sounds like more than what you guys are running, but I do have a core set.
Aside from the quote Chrome app ones like Docs, Sheets, and Slides, there are 6. One password, Cisco WebEx, Foxy Proxy, Google Docs Offline, Pinboard, and User Agent Switcher. That's it.
Yeah, I have a proxy switcher, a hover zoom, which now is in great question as to whether or not. Like, what's the functionality versus security?
What's the hover zoom do? Is that because you're
when
old?
you hover over an image, it'll make it full size?
Because you're old?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I'm old, mostly, yeah. Even with glasses, it helps a lot.
Those aren't glasses. Those are cheaters.
They are cheaters. They're just fancy cheaters. That's all they are. I went a little too over the top with my cheaters. I have ones that are like 70s porn star ridiculous. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's very polarizing. Either people are like, what are those? Or they're like, maybe next show we'll break them out.
Nice.
Anyway.
So what's next?
Well, speaking of stuff that's been there for a really long time and kind of like an add-on, nasty code execution bug in WinRAR. We all know and love and remember WinRAR. I haven't had to use it recently. I haven't had to use it very often, probably due to the fact that we all have a lot more bandwidth than we did back in the day, and we don't require something like WinRAR. File systems have advanced I used WinRAR to break up really large files into smaller, like for distributing a VM for a class.
Yep. Or for say downloading stuff from binary news groups or
that.
I mean,
yes, I've told my friends told me. I mean, I told my friends. I mean, my friends told me.
That's what I read on the internet.
I read it on the internet that you could get pirated material that way. But anyway, the vulnerability has been there for millions of users for 14 years. It was the result of an absolute path traversal flaw residing in a DLL. There was third-party code that's in a library that hasn't been updated since 2005.
Oof.
Yes. This is I think, some of the fundamental problems. Now, fundamental problems we're going to have to deal with. And it's kind of scary that some of this shit's been out there for 14 years and just being fixed and discovered now. I mean, good that it's being discovered now, but how many more of these vulnerabilities in that I've included a library, it's never been checked. By the way, it's either in control, an evil, bad person's in control of this library, or it's just not being updated and therefore has vulnerabilities that everyone just forgot. I mean, as a software developer.
Or more importantly, who has known about said vulnerability for 14 years?
Right, and has been exploiting it.
PHP.
Yeah, and WordPress has another one that's been out there for a long time.
This is I think this is a challenge a little bit with leveraging open source code embedding these binaries into your code base. There's a lot of dependencies of other binaries. And some of these binaries have not been either updated or checked in a long time. And there's a ton of vulnerabilities and they're not getting closed. And when we were at Layered Insight, we always picked on PHP. The PHP binary keeps growing in vulnerabilities and nobody's fixing the stuff, right? This is just another example of that. And it's very dangerous when we just do an include of a binary
or a library.
We've never checked it, or a library, and we've never checked it to understand, are there vulnerabilities sitting here that we're now exposing just because we decided to take some open source off the shelf?
This was the classic, it works, don't touch it.
This was the subject of Kevin Johnson's talk at Wild West Hackenfest this year, was reliance on third-party modules has devastated us.
Yeah.
And we need to maybe get back to basics and do all this processing with some security in mind ourselves, as opposed to relying on third-party modules.
My whole thing is, if you're practicing really good DevSec Ops, I talked about this, I think, last week on a show. I was talking to someone, and they were talking about the right way to check that all your libraries are secure. As Matt mentioned, he worked for companies, and there's lots of Tenable bought someone. Like, there are lots of companies are looking for either flaws in containers or flaws in libraries or other third-party code. If everyone's doing this, aren't we discovering vulnerabilities that these maintainers may not have known about and reporting them and making the world a better place just by practicing good DevSec Ops, right? In other words, if I'm taking WinRAR as an example and I'm practicing DevSec Ops and DevOps and I'm moving towards that model and I'm doing an inventory and I'm looking at all the things and I'm doing my scanning and fuzzing and QA testing and dynamic analysis, I'm likely going to run into one of these vulnerabilities. If everyone's doing that, we improve the overall security level of all of the code, not just our own code, but those other libraries that are being included inside of our software, essentially making the world a better place. Given the number of reports on this software and all different kinds of software that has these vulnerabilities, makes me think there are very few that are actually practicing a really good DevOps, DevSecOps process or an SDLC that's finding these vulnerabilities, or they're not including the libraries they're including are the ones that are being more secure, not the ones in, poor free software like WinRAR.
I wondered, let's say we've got an open source project and somebody says, here's this horrific bug that I found in your stuff. And the open source is, they're maintaining it out of their goodwill. What's the reaction when somebody does that? Are they, are they looking to blow them out of the water? Or are they how inclined are they to actually take action and fix the flaw?
I think, like anything, it varies, Lee. I think the track record on a lot of more major open source projects is they fix them oftentimes faster than commercial software. And oftentimes that's just because one of the contributors can make a commit, and if it passes QA, it gets out of the next release, right? And it's off to the races.
You mean passes QA? You mean it worked on my machine?
Well, yeah. I use the term QA loosely. When I say QA, I mean it compiled and passed some basic unit tests. Therefore, it was committed into the
basic unit tests.
Yeah.
You mean it compiled and gave the results that I expected that one time?
It compiled and it ran. Okay,
yes,
right.
That was the basic unit test.
It compiled and it ran with not too many errors.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
With just as many or maybe less errors than before.
Yep. And I actually sort of experienced that exact type of thing over the last couple of days. I've been following a new project. Well, it's an old project that I just had some renewed interest in, and it was basically there's a bug report filed today, and within an hour it was fixed. And the response was, "Wow, you're fast." Like, yeah, because we don't have to go through all this huge process of sec DevOps and. Yeah, it was something fairly simple to fix.
So this DLL in WinRAR uses ACE compression. I'm assuming that's kind of like middle-out compression, is my guess.
Is it like a bandage, like the wrap?
Yeah, but it's probably. Okay. But here's my thing. Let's say I'm a WinRAR developer, I'm just going to try and put myself in this shoes of a developer that's developing compression software. I need to support this other similar or other method of compression. Am I going to write all of the code from scratch to implement this compression algorithm, like middle-out compression, or am I going to go get this library, then I'm like, oh, all I have to do is call this library.
And
Hey, it works. Our software is now compatible with all these different platforms and all these different files because I incorporated this library in 2005. And moving forward, I don't have to do any maintenance on it. Like, hey, it passes QA.
Yep,
like
it does what it's supposed to do.
It passes the linting test, largely because we don't have the source code, maybe. It passes the QA, like everything builds when I incorporate this library.
Yep.
It runs, like I can run WinRAR in an automated environment, and it runs, everything's happy. And so for 14 years, like I'm off to the races. I don't have to, as a developer, I can go on and implement all these other features and bug requests that people are requesting of me, but lo and behold, that library never really got tested for security.
Right. And maybe maybe I should re-implement this in my own function or my own library because it hasn't been maintained in 9 years.
But I've got a dozen bug requests that came in today that I need to attend to. And I'm an open source developer, so I have a day job. And so like I worked on this on the weekend, and I really want to implement this other feature and not go back and like retrofit some library that I implemented 5 years ago.
And WinRAR is semi-obtuse for its market share.
Right.
And I get it.
It's interesting.
WinZip, compress, archive, lots of other choices out there.
Yeah, but for RAR though, I mean, it's on Windows. It's pretty much WinRAR. On OS 10, it was this really weird one. There was a different program, Keka. Thank you. It was Keka. On Linux, is it just on RAR? There was like I don't know. It's like apt. It's like an apt package you install, right? There's various utilities to handle it.
I threw away all my Windows devices, so I don't know anymore.
I agree, Matt. I do too, which is why with Keka is the one that I've been using on OS 10 largely for RAR files, for creating and decompressing them, which is interesting. Anyway, you wonder what how the other OS 10 and Linux now, my question is, how are they implementing this ACE compression? Right? Is there another open source library? And is it vulnerable to something in a similar kind of...
Me strokes his beard,
right?
Wonderingly, yes, knowingly.
Yes.
And if Apple uses it, they will definitely not disclose it.
Well, Keka is a third-party app, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's on the third... OS 10 doesn't distribute... Well, that's why we need Keka, because they don't distribute anything natively.
Right.
Neither does Microsoft. It's all third-party. And third-party libraries, apparently, on top of that. Huh. Yes. I mean, tar and gzip have worked really well for me in Linux and Unix environment for a really long time.
Yep. bzip and... Yep.
That being said, the next bug we'll talk about now that I've said that is probably something in tar and gzip.
Nice. It's been around since the dawn of man.
Right.
Right.
Those literally have been since the dawn of Unix. Some of those have been around. Anyway. Where are we going next? Well, let's talk about WordPress. There's a remote
WordPress
code
one.
Execution flaw in 5.0.0. I'm pretty sure we're on 5.0.2 or 3 or
if
something.
If not, you will be tomorrow.
We're beyond the latest revision of WordPress is definitely beyond .0.0 5 branch.
Yeah.
And this is could be exploited. So an attacker who has at least an author privilege, so this is very much a privilege escalation vulnerability, they're able to install and execute arbitrary PHP code on the underlying server. So not, I mean, terribly earth-shattering. It is more like a privilege escalation.
Yep.
I mean, it is privilege escalation, I think. Anyway, not all that interesting.
But it's PHP, and we did cover a WordPress plugin vulnerability the other day on Hack Naked News, which was interesting, right? This plugin gave you the ability to like upload malicious files and delete files off your WordPress. So WordPress has had a couple issues this week in the news.
Always issues. Well, and that's the problem. There's so many vulnerabilities that we say, well, this requires author privileges. If you've got a plugin that's vulnerable, you can likely get an account that gives you author privileges and then use this to escalate privileges. There's just so many different exploits to build on in WordPress.
I wonder, now that we think about it, we get so many third-party requests to become a guest author on the blog.
How many of those?
How many of those are social engineering attempts to get author privileges on the blog?
Yeah,
Get lots of those.
At that, you just find an exploit and make yourself an author.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I start wondering.
Go ahead, Lee.
You remember last December there was the big issue with PHP 5 being vulnerable and dying, and upgrade to PHP 7. I wonder how many CMS services like WordPress are still running the old buggy PHP underneath there, despite all these other plugins.
Well, I know that our WordPress provider definitely had an upgrade path to later versions of PHP. Is like almost as soon as it came out. And I think that's a valid point, Lee, is whether you're hosting it yourself or hosting it with someone else.
Yeah.
The security of your WordPress instance is really dependent on the speed at which you can upgrade it. Or if you don't have control of those subsystems, the speed at which your provider can upgrade those, and how easy and or difficult it is.
Right.
With our provider, you make snapshots. You can make snapshots, and you can create 3 different instances or environments of your WordPress site. So you can upgrade it in one, test it, make sure it works, push that into the other one. Beautiful. If you want to do it live, you can make a backup. You can do the upgrade. If it fails, you can always revert, right?
Yep.
So I found, after doing WordPress for so many years, that it's really just all about being as flexible and fast in testing all of the upgrades to plugins, to themes, the WordPress engine itself, PHP. All of those things have to be just like really easy, test, deploy, go.
Yep.
I'll give a plug. WP Engine, I think, does a great job at that. They give you a great facility to do that. In cost-wise, security risk-wise, you look at hosting it yourself or hosting it with someone that's going to provide you all those facilities. I'm like, why am I going to go build what they already built?
Yep.
Interacting with their engineers, I'm like, these are people that really know WordPress very, very well. I'm like, I'm going to use their platform.
Yep.
I think that's a lot of decisions, Matt, you and I have talked about, that a lot of organizations are going to make, right? They're going to go to a platform, whether that's for containers, whether that's for virtual machines, whether that's for applications of any kind, that can take care of the plumbing probably better than you can do it yourself, right?
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the advantage of WP Engine in this particular case for us. But we're seeing this elsewhere in the entire cloud stack, right? Any platform as a service, container as a service, orchestration as a service, platform makes it easier for you not to deal with, how do I scale a Kubernetes cluster, right? I mean, that's not easy for most organizations.
Right. Fun to do in a lab. Fun to do in a lab. Not something that everyone should try doing in production. Now, financial services largely are spinning up their own private clouds and infrastructure, as well they should. But they're putting
they
the
have
time
the resources to do it. I mean, they've got the bodies that can do it. I mean, you look at what Capital One's doing, for example. I mean, they've got a great team. They're building out all this stuff, but they're still moving it to cloud. But all the financials have huge staffs to be able to do this. But not every company has that kind of resource availability to do this stuff on their own.
And you think of what's at stake, having done some stock trading. You click the buttons and you're like, oh man, like I know how technology works under the covers, like even just I don't know how every technology works, right? But like having built services for enterprises, and you're clicking buttons straight, and you're like, man, this has to be secure, reliable, fast, like the whole thing. And that's why I think they're making the decision to own a lot of that infrastructure themselves, to control all of those variables. When you start handing control over to a cloud provider, that has to be balanced with your business plan and your risk and the services you provide.
And that said, you take that back to the WordPress and host it yourself or internal or third-party provider. That all comes back to the same sort of mentality. If you think about this most recent Docker issue, Docker Kubernetes, and it was the underlying framework, and I can't remember what it is. It's on the tip of my tongue. But it affected all of the containerization functions.
Oh, that was run.
Yeah, run C. If you think
Run
about something
C,
like run C, that affects all of the containerization. I mean, even some of the big providers themselves struggled for potentially days, and folks that have implemented it are still vulnerable to this stuff weeks later because it required user intervention. That this is still a big problem that doesn't get escaped from depending on where you put your stuff or how much staff you have.
Larry, I love this one because this is so easy to avoid. You don't give up root privileges in your containers ever. But this is what things. But the exploit is based on having root privileges UID 0. If you're running in an ECS, EKS, etc., where you can't run root privileges, or you're running in a Fargate where you don't have it, this is easy to avoid. But the problem is we've decided that it's okay to give up root privileges in our agents and therefore in our containers to actually give us security privileges, which is just freaking crazy to me. But to your point, I mean, people are scrambling now because they gave up all these privileges, which we've been telling people for years. Just don't do this stuff.
And I hate to say it, this one was near and dear to my heart because InGuardians does their weekly newsletter, and this was the subject of the weekly newsletter this week was Run C. Like, this is the one blurb you need to know about as a C-level executive or as someone in a position that needs to have one thing that they need to focus on this week, type of thing. And that was the one that I spent hours and hours and hours about figuring out what this looks like. And it was terrifying. And Matt, you're absolutely right. Giving up that root access and more importantly, giving the ability for folks to just not know what they're deploying as a container. Oh, hey, I want to do Kismet in a container. Give me that public container. Well, who made said container and what was in it?
And that's like the Chrome extension problem all over again.
And the WordPress plugin problem all over again.
Absolutely.
So,
I found it on Reddit.
It gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking about it because, yikes.
I keep saying it. No root. I mean, if you think about the best way to secure the application for the digital transformation and containerization, you cannot give up root in those containers. You have to protect that environment. And this Run C vulnerability that was announced a week ago, and in less than a week, the exploits were published on GitHub. I mean, within a week, we had active exploits to completely destroy your application in production. That's just crazy to me.
And not just that application, every application.
Yes.
Because if you can escape the container, you have access to the host, which means you can destroy every application that you're hosting there. And then if you have root level access to the host, you can potentially use that to explore other hosts and other portions of the network.
There's some
and exploit them and on and on and on. This is a huge daisy chain of events.
And there's great technology to help protect your containers.
Absolutely.
But I still side with Matt. The architecture from the beginning has to carry that security message and carry security by design.
Absolutely.
It makes your job way easier.
Yep.
Look, you can do Capsulate. I've spent some time with them. Their technology is fantastic. I'd be really surprised if they were not 100% protecting their customers against something like a Run C. That's just in their DNA.
Yep. Well, so one, you don't do the bad thing with running any of your Run C stuff as root. You can configure it not to be CUID.
But here's the thing: developers are going to be like, I just need to make this work. It works this way, and they're in DevOps. They're making potentially some of those decisions, maybe with security, maybe without. Maybe security lost that argument. So that's kind of my point there.
And not to dismiss any of the folks that you guys we've done briefs with, any of those, but SE Linux and AppArmor could save your ass with something like that.
And then I spoke with Polyverse, which compiles all of your binaries with runtime protection. Different signatures and varies all of the various points of execution in memory, so that even if you do have some kind of exploit, it will not work because they varied all the memory addresses in using all the technology available to us, but made it available in a repo.
Additional ASLR, DEP, any of those types of things in and above all of those.
Yeah, so they're using available technologies, but making it available in a package repo that's specific to you. So when you install all the binaries from your package that's coming from their repo, those binaries are compiled to have different memory addresses. So your exploit doesn't work against me unless you specifically craft it for me. If you go to someone else, it's going to be
barriers to enter.
different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
so that's
huge
one.
barriers to enter.
And then Capsulate's doing fantastic. I mean, essentially, a lot of the techniques to detect exploits on the endpoint kind of thing, they're detecting it inside of containers in on a Linux platform and doing a really good job of that as well. So, I mean, there are other defensive technologies you can build on top of that, but the best thing to do is have your architecture be secure from the beginning, do the threat modeling, and do training and awareness with your ops and developers to make sure they're implementing these systems securely. That gets really complicated. I mean, when we get into containers, and I was just reviewing my slides for RSA, I'll be talking about this at RSA, the various decisions that you have to make are decisions that previously were made by developers, network engineers, systems administrators, albeit sometimes in silos, but sometimes together. Now developers can basically just make those decisions and deploy the environment however they want because it's all virtual. It's all in software now.
It's completely software defined. There's unless you're embedding security into the DevOps process, there's no way to catch these things until the code's live, and by then it's too late. I mean, this has been the holy grail of DevSec Ops and what we ultimately want to do, but we have to understand that security has to be integrated along the DevOps process if we're going to catch this stuff before it goes into production. Because if we're at the end of the cycle like we are today, forget it, game over.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the problem I'm having is that the guy who's in the developer role is no longer, without all the support of the engineers that focused on things like security and more. His security is only as good as his Google foo. He's going to find something that's reasonably close to what he wants and download it and deploy it. And then somebody's going to say, well, we should put some security monitor in there, and they'll say he'll find something, and it'll probably run his root because that's what that all does. Leaving the door back open again. I mean, how do we get the education piece in here?
Yeah, and I don't know that education is the way to do this because we tried the education piece. I think we have to look at various checkpoints in the CI/CD process flow to look for some of these aspects as part of the pipeline to say, look, I can't pass the build. I can't allow this to be moved into staging and or production. That's where I think that integration point has to happen. And I'm a big believer that security has to figure out how to integrate its solutions better into what the DevOps process looks like than trying to say, nah, look, we'll just do this at the end and you guys will log in and you'll take care of all this stuff. It will never, ever work.
Risk is it's something that needs to be balanced throughout the entire process, right? And if it, like Matt said, if it's at the end, it's too late. Things have already been implemented a la Equifax in a certain way that makes it very, very difficult to keep updated. Where organizations are leading in security is they're making those decisions early on, allowing their developers to develop and deploy into an environment that is a lot more resilient than you would have previously in a waterfall model. I think is really the essence of DevOps and DevSec Ops.
The other
from
one
a security perspective.
The other one from the security perspective that kind of concerns me is that, you know, security is integrated in all the Sec DevOps stuff, and they have to now be the experts in so many things to approve and or deny. And how many, think about our industry from either the red or the blue side, or a combination thereof, about how many folks really know containerization security from the get-go. I mean, these folks are probably few and far between. And
it's true.
Even at the amateur level, to know that some of these things could be an issue and or can effectively invoke change in that Sec DevOps process.
Many of them work for security vendors today.
Yeah.
I mean, John Kinsella comes to mind. I mean, one of the most brilliant people on containerization security I've ever spoken with. I want to keep John very close to us. You know, his knowledge is awesome. But how many Johns are there?
The guys at Signal Sciences, James Wickett and others. I mean, these guys live this stuff in the trenches and understood the need to bring security and DevOps together in a way that allowed them to streamline the entire process, right? And so there's a number of guys, you're right, Paul, I think, that have become vendors now because they saw the challenges of the integration of security into DevOps, and now they're building solutions to try to improve this. So you've got the layered insight guys, you've got the signal sciences guys. I mean, there's others out there in the industry that just saw the need to bring all this stuff together.
Yeah, and a lot of those folks aren't security people like we've interviewed on the show before, right? They're people with a development background and ops background that have seen the security problems and have kind of delved into this whole security thing, and those are folks we want to bring on our shows because this is, I mean, the problem is going to get worse before it gets better, in my opinion. I think we've got a long road ahead of us in securing these environments, even from the operational level. We're not even talking about the app level, right? I mean, signal sciences, yes, but beyond that, like, we're not even talking about the ins and outs of the actual application itself. Right. Yeah. Right. All right. What else do we have?
There was an interesting article on, and we covered aspects of this week with the bug bounties, right? Google paid out some big money this year. Facebook paid out some money this year. Now Microsoft's upping their bounties for different bugs. I mean, it's getting interesting to monetize the aspects of these bugs. I think Google was $3.4 million in 2018 for bugs. Facebook paid $25,000 for a cross-site request forgery bug. Now you see Microsoft adding up to $30,000 for these bugs. You know, it's getting pretty lucrative for researchers.
I would still argue that you know, many folks that participate in bug bounty stuff would say don't quit your day job.
I agree. Yeah.
This is potentially supplemental income, like, and or something you stumble across and you get a couple $100 in your pocket.
I think there's a lot of opportunistic income with respects to bug bounties. To Matt's point, though, if you look at it from the flip side, like, I think as a bug bounty hunter, you're likely that's not your only job, right? From the other side, from the corporation's perspective, you're paying out a lot of money in bug bounties now. And in both directions, does that make sense? Does this model hold up? And I think that there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat when we talk about bug bounties, right? You've got, I think, a private bug bounty, a public bug bounty, different restrictions on your bug bounty, different maturity levels that are implementing a bug bounty. All that needs to be balanced. The good bug bounty companies like BugCrowd will help you balance that, right? And lead you down the right path, right? I think Casey's built a great company that's largely doing that for customers, right? And guiding them to be like, if you haven't done any security and you're just like, well, I'm going to do a bug bounty program, probably not the best thing to do, right? So it needs to be structured correctly. I think in Google's perspective, probably $3.4 million for Google, probably a pretty good investment in their bug bounty program. Although, I mean, that's kind of high-level speculation, but if you look at the revenue that Google's bringing in, what's at stake for Google for finding, fixing, and disclosing bugs, $3.4 million is probably pretty good. Now, if you're a much, much, much smaller company,
$3.4 million,
your revenue is nowhere close to Google, and you're spending $3.4 million on a bug bounty, probably not the best case. And if you're spending 100% of your time hunting for bugs, that is almost equivalent to gambling in my. That's kind of what I'm hearing, Larry, on the street. Basically, is like, sometimes you get lucky, but not something I see people taking up full time. But good that the people are doing it on the side. I think there are very positive things from bug bounty programs. I think it's also something that is kind of abused and not designed correctly from the start. All right. What else do we have in stories? Burnout. You guys want to talk about burnout? I know there was a blip. Dark reading has really registration walled, or they've protected a lot of their content, so I'm not able to read all of their articles. Which everyone's going to make money. Everyone's going to have a business, right? Yep. I like to see more of their articles be public, but they did have one on burnout, which I think was one that was part of a several-part series. But I think Jack has talked a lot about burnout don't think when I read this article there was much that jumped out at me as being drastically different as to why we suffer from burnout. Right? I've experienced that recently too, and some firewall upgrades. But you know,
I want to hear Lee's story number 2 and number 4.
Okay.
So Lee, you pick which one goes first, I guess.
So the number 4 was kind of a weird.
Who does number 2 work for?
2 is before 4.
Okay. So Stratcom did a study on whether they could basically social engineer members of the military who were been trained not to release OPSEC information. And they set up fake Facebook pages and groups, and they basically pwned these guys. And one of the interesting things they were tracking is like how quickly like Facebook's fake user or duplicate user or inappropriate group stuff shut them down. Some stuff got them in a couple of days. Some stuff never got shut down, even though it was clearly a violation of what Facebook would allow. So it was one of those, you can't count on Facebook to make sure everything's legit. Well, yeah, I know. Not really a news story there, although they are working on getting better at that. You still got to be fairly smart.
I think YouTube, Facebook Lee does a really, puts a lot of effort, I should say. I don't want to say they do a good job, but they put a lot of effort into policing. If you look at a lot of the memes on Facebook, right, they're like, yeah, I post this, someone reports it, you go into Facebook jail. That's happening more and more today on Facebook. I go back to my, Stogie Geeks, even some of the Security Weekly stuff, we ran into problems on Facebook. Ever since the election thing happened and the scandal happened with the election on Facebook, they take it even more seriously. However, you go to YouTube, and it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
And the pendulum has kind of swung back and forth. Our Hack Naked News, I suspect, was a suspect that got our channel taken down. Largely, that hasn't happened lately. And props to all the security people at both companies that listen to the show. We love you because you help us. We help you. You help us. We help each other. It's great. Thank you for that.
Hand jobs all around.
What? Yeah. But on YouTube, they've got a serious problem. And I see reports from friends and family that say, and I haven't validated how true this is, that there are kids videos that are targeted at kids that are teaching them how to kill themselves and like all this nefarious content on YouTube that they're having a really tough time policing. So the study you referenced, Lee, I think is very accurate as to how we police this content.
Yeah, and that said, our kids have unrestricted to their knowledge access to YouTube. They say, we tell them that otherwise because we know what Daddy does for a living. Daddy can see everything.
Right. But sure, I have a log of everything. I do use the circle thing.
Yep.
It does have a YouTube filter on it, but again, I find it's not effective because how do you know what YouTube video is good and what's not?
And Orion, our youngest, who's 5.5 and reads better, can't read well, but is getting better. She does YouTube and she does like the toy reviews and like the share family and all this type of stuff. And then every once in a while I look over and I look over their shoulder very frequently while they're doing stuff.
I think shoulder surfing is a great way to police YouTube today because technically it's very difficult.
Right. And specifically they get down that YouTube hole, and next thing I know, the little one is watching Disney spoofs with Mickey Mouse that are all in Arabic.
Yep.
And I'm like, what the hell are you watching? I'm like, nope, let's back up like 12 steps here. Back up that YouTube hole and go down somewhere else.
Yep. So. They get into other ones that are in a different language, and they're still watching them.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are you still watching that?
Because they're not listening. They're just watching.
They're just watching.
We're just watching.
And
that's the same thing. Yeah, absolutely. All the knockoff Disney stuff in Arabic. Like.
Right.
But,
and the entire Asian culture, so it can just go sideways pretty quickly.
Lee?
Well, but like we were saying, it's really tough to police it, let alone set up, something like YouTube's going to try and automate that policing, and really hard to create the right filters to trap and contain it. And of course, the rate of change is really high, which is, an awesome success for YouTube, but really a pain if you're trying to police it. Yep. And I'm glad I don't have young kids to try and help figure out what they should and shouldn't be watching. It must be a royal pain in the ass to get it right these days.
Yeah, and then of course we start talking about, and I'm gonna take us off reservation a little bit. We're talking about some of these other platforms, like the 11-year-old asked, "Daddy, can I have TikTok?"
What is that?
It's the short. It's like a replacement for Vines, where they can do funny short videos type of thing. And I'm like, I don't know a lot about TikTok, but I've seen a little bit, and let's start it. And like, she's 11. What kind of videos is she going to post? She's going to post pictures of the cat, or videos of the cat, or silly songs.
Yeah, my son around the same age. Your daughter, my son's around the same age.
Exactly. And she did one. We have a rabbit named Felicia. So bye, Felicia.
Bye, Felicia.
So she did one of those, and it was the rabbit in the cage, and hi, Felicia, and then next thing you know, bye, Felicia, and Felicia's not in the cage. Like what, one of those. I'm like, what? That's great. And
well, hold on.
And, but wait, she posted a video the other day that was her taking the cat, and the channel is named after the cat that she's playing with, and she's playing with the cat, and she takes the cat, and she picks the cat, and she puts it up in her bunk bed, and the cat looks at her and scowls. This is the third video she's posted, and she has 1,300 likes on this video.
It's awesome.
Why?
Enable ads on that.
Why? But why?
Hell?
But why?
Because it's a pussy on the bed?
Or 11-year-old girl?
Or, yeah, that's creepy too. Absolutely.
Like, why?
Ooh.
Yeah, why?
I also think it's amazing how pop culture, they learn about pop culture, and they come out with things, and I'm like the whole Bye Felicia thing. I'm like, guys, that's from a movie that you're not ready to watch. And they're also going to like say hello to my little friend. Apparently that appeared in a lot of YouTube videos. And I'm like, do you know what movie that's from? They're like, it's from a movie. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right,
I
got a lot of explaining to do now. Right?
Say hello to my little friend.
It's just not. Anyway.
But yeah, it's a terrifying time to be a parent. And
I think it's the best approach, I believe. We get asked this all the time, right? It's a combination of just spending time with your children, being aware of what they're doing, training, awareness, teaching them, being with them. That's part of it.
Yep.
The other part of it is you got to use some technology in conjunction with that.
Yes.
The same thing that we do security in our enterprises too, right? We spend time with our users, we try and educate them, but we also have technology that is trying to protect them as well. It's the same thing at home. When I tell other parents, at Little League and school events, when they talk about iPad usage and inappropriate, I'm like, well, I can just turn the internet off for the whole house. And they're like, how do you do that? I'm like, well, it's a really easy thing. Like you get the circle thing and you plug it in, you get an app, and you can control time and how much time they spend, what they're watching. And I'm like, it's a great, it's a great measure for that.
And we take the non-technology approach. You don't get screen time until your homework's done.
Yeah, and I'm a believer you got to use both.
Yep.
Right.
And hey, give me your iPad. You're not doing such and such. Give me your iPad. It goes on the charger.
I physically will take them from them, and I will also put limits on them with technology.
They don't get to take them to their room unless they have previously asked, and
you have to log everything too.
And and you know what? I don't necessarily log everything, but they think I do.
Yes, that's more important.
They think I do.
Yes.
And I go back to the story that the oldest daughter got a Amazon Fire Stick for her TV for Christmas, and said, we're trusting you with what you do, and remember what Daddy does for a living. Daddy can see everything that you do.
I am watching you.
And I am watching you. And if you watch bad shows, we'll know.
The providers have gotten...
And 15 minutes later, she installed a game, and I went upstairs. And I'm like, hey, how's such and such a game?
You got to give them reminders.
And she's like, wait, what?
And in general, Lee, I think this study's good because it also, I think, should underscore the fact that the providers themselves are giving parents and administrators more tools to monitor this kind of stuff as well. In iOS, all of a sudden, the updates came out. There was it monitors your time, right? Android too, it monitors your screen time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And Lee, sorry we hijacked that total thread about government stuff to turn it into family, but
No, no, I think that was really actually much more relevant. The government stuff is interesting, but the family stuff is what's real to people. That's going to be, it hits a lot closer to home.
Well, and I think that leaks into the enterprise too. You know, Security Weekly sharing information and data with a lot of different organizations. Sometimes the pendulum can swing in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we want you to watch this video, right, for whatever, to approve something or whatever. That's what we do. We create content. Sometimes we like people to view that content. Sometimes we run into trouble. Like, how are we going to share this with you if everything is blocked? I think there's still that IT security department of no that is just cutting off, you know, all of these services. That is kind of scary.
Yeah. And I've said this a number of times, is that the security group is not there. Let's put it, all right, let me rephrase. The security group should not be there to say no. The security group should be there to say no, but we can do these things if you are willing to risk accept these types of things.
Right.
So it's not a no, it's a this is not a good idea. This is a no, but this is the type of things you're opening yourself up to, and someone else needs to understand the problem and sign off what they're risk accepting.
Right. It's still a problem today. I mean, Matt, we see it. The number of vendors today that are attacking the problem of how do we share files securely, right? How do we, if we're going to share a file, how do we, or video, how do we do that in a secure manner that can be controlled and monitored by IT? And I get it. You know, we've all lived that role before. And there's somewhat of a race to, I think, who's going to be the, you know, provider of these applications that allow you to control other applications.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, we'll continue to see these aspects, right? Who do we trust? Who don't we trust? Who's going to be this layer that allows us to do this? That's just one aspect. And it, you know, this is interesting. It ties into the other article that we wanted from Lee, which is this whole concept of Splunk's change in direction on Russian headquartered companies. I mean, think about that, right? I mean, here's an organization that has said, look, we're not going to continue to sell solutions to literally a whole country. Talk about trust. I mean, that's crazy.
Lee.
Well, I was reading this and it was kind of interesting, and I was thinking, are they really? I mean, what's behind this? For example, there's a list of embargoed countries that we're not supposed to do business with as the U.S. It's what? North Korea,
North Korea, Libya. There's
Cuba,
a number
Iran,
of companies.
Sudan, Syria. There's like 5, and Russia is not one of those 5. For better or for whatever reason. I'm thinking, why Russia? I mean, yeah, there's a lot of is this political hype response, or is there actually a real threat that they're trying to contain?
Or is it a response to the political aspects of it too?
Yeah, the political hype response,
If you talk to a lot of enterprises that are doing business internationally, there's a lot of interesting things that go on when, let's say, you set up a corporate office in some other country. Where do the laws, you know, kind of cross road? Like, what do you have to conform to? What do you say no to? Or, as in the case with Splunk, what were the conditions that, you know, were met that Splunk finally said it's not worth doing business in this country? I actually, not knowing any of the details, but just speculatively, I agree with Splunk. If you're going to pull out of that country, something had to have happened, that there was some chain of events that came to a head, and they were like, look, either we're able to do this or we're pulling out. And Russia was like, no, you've got to do this. Again, pure speculation on my part. And Splunk was like, no, we're pulling out. And I think that's again a risk equation that the company's going through, and you know, that happens. Some companies may choose not to do business in China, or, you know, spin up a different company and do business in China.
And I've seen the reverse case of this, right? I've seen companies walk away from Russian companies like Kaspersky as
Right.
part of
Yes.
their embedding strategy, right? So this is the first time I've seen it on
The flip
a
side.
vendor
Converse.
taking a position with a country. What I've traditionally seen is certain vendors saying, look, okay, I get it. You're in Russia, but we've decided we're not going to embed your technology into our solutions. And I've seen that with Kaspersky in a couple different cases. This is a little interesting, but where they basically said, look, if you're headquartered in Russia, we're not going to sell you any solutions. This is kind of the flip side of that, which I really haven't seen up until this announcement.
Well, and you've seen it even with some of our allies. Well, ones that I would consider Israel an ally. But when Checkpoint was going to acquire SourceFire, there was a lot of speculation as to why that was, deal wasn't going to go through. Largely, it was centered around that the government ran Checkpoint firewalls, and Checkpoint was headquartered in Israel. But that's an ally, and so again, we don't know all of the details that go into all of these decisions, and so we can only speculate, which is a lot of fun and a great part of our job today is we get to speculate.
Yeah,
with
interesting.
with alcohol.
With alcohol. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it helps the thoughts come more quickly.
Or loosely.
Slowly.
Or the conspiracies to come more quickly, depending on which side
There we
you're
go.
on.
Like my
They come more loosely anyways.
like my alien conspiracy
Yes.
theories.
Yes.
In any case.
So with that, Paul, what do you think?
What else is going on in the news? Anything worth talking about, or are we calling it?
I say we call it.
All right.
Let's call it.
There's lots to talk more about, but we could be here all night.
We could be. Thank you, everyone, Matt and Lee and everyone else who was on tonight's show, Larry especially. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Larry,
Yeah.
take us out.
Over and